Okay, so I've decided I'm not gonna edit these at all because this is so hard to read aloud, and I just feel like I just need to do it in one take. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, you would think that if it's something that's really hard to read aloud, I should like literally not do it in one take, but I feel like I need to do it in one take. Also, I just felt the need to like read this to you guys because it's like one of my favorite stories. And I know I'm saying like a lot, but like it's true. This is one of the best stories in the entire canon of the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser series, and that is a wide canon. It is written by Fritz Leiber, or let's call the whole thing off, and I don't know how you really pronounce it. I think he would always say Lieber, but I think all of us are saying Leiber. Again, let's just call the whole thing off. There are many stories in the series, and like Sherlock Holmes, there are some of them, a lot of them that are short story length, and there are some of them that are novel length. Maybe in the future, if you like this, I will do one of my favorite ones, which is a novel length one, but I'm gonna start with a short story length one because I just feel like this tells you everything you need to know about these two insane, unhinged characters and this insane, unhinged world. So yeah, I don't think I need to introduce it anymore because I think that he, as a writer, introduces you to this world pretty well in the beginning of this particular story. So if you want to read more about these two crazy sword and sorcery, some of the original sword and sorcery characters, like right around when Conan had just started to be great, and apparently, fun fact, Lovecraft himself had actually read some of these early drafts and had given Lieber some feedback, which is kind of fucking amazing. So this might be the same kind of ish world as Lovecraft's weird world, but he kind of like made it not that so he could get published. Old school sword and sorcery, like when sword and sorcery wasn't even called that. I will give you a little content warning just because I feel nice. This is gnarly, and there's some shit that there's some shit. There are some word choice that he uses, which I appreciate for the time period and for what this world is, but you need to just understand that there's some tough diction in this, and I know that all of us can really appreciate that tough diction. One of my favorite stories of all of the adventures of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, this is called Lean Times in Lankhmar. Once upon a time in Lankhmar, city of the Black Toga, in the world of Nehwan, 2 years after the year of the feathered death, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser parted their ways. Exactly what caused the tall, brawling barbarian and the slim, elusive prince of thieves to fall out, and the mighty adventuring partnership to be broken, is uncertainly known, and was at the time the subject of much speculation. Some said they quarreled over a girl. Others maintained with even greater unlikelihood that they had disagreed over the proper division of a loot of jewels raped from Mulch the moneylender. The strength of the scrolls suggests that their mutual cooling off was largely the reflection of a supernatural enmity existing at the time between Shilba of the Eyeless Face, the Mouser's demonic mentor, and Nim Gobble of the Seven Eyes, Fafhrd's alien and multi-serpentine patron. The likeliest explanation, which runs directly counter to the Mulch hypothesis, is simply that times were hard in Lankhmar, adventures few and uninviting, and that the two heroes had reached that point in life when hard-pressed men desire to admix even the rarest quests and pleasurings with certain prudent activities, leading either to financial or to spiritual security, though seldom, if ever, to both. This theory that boredom and insecurity, and a difference of opinion as to how these dismal feelings might best be dealt with, chiefly underlay the estrangement of the twain. This theory might account for, and might perhaps even subsume, the otherwise ridiculous suggestion that the two comrades fell out of the proper spelling of Fafhrd name, the Mouser perversely favoring a simple Lankhmarian equivalent of Faferd, while the name's owner insisted that only the original mouth-filling agglomeration of consonants could continue to satisfy his ear and eye and his semi-literate, barbarous sense of the fitness of things. Bored and insecure men wheel loose arrows at dust motes. Certain it is that their friendship, though not utterly fractured, grew very cold, and that their life ways, though both continuing in Lankhmar, diverged remarkably. The Grey Mouser entered the service of one Pulg, a rising racketeer of small religions, a lord of Lankhmar's dark underworld who levied tribute from the priests of all godlets seeking to become gods, on pain of various unpleasant, disturbing, and revolting things happening at future services of the defaulting godlet. If a priest didn't pay Pulg, his miracles were sure to misfire. His congregation and collection would fall off sharply, and it was quite possible that a bruised skin and broken bones would be his lot. Accompanied by 3 or 4 of Pulg's bullies and frequently a slim dancing girl or two, the Mouser became a familiar and newly ominous sight in Lankhmar's Street of the Gods, which leads from the Marsh Gate to the distant docks in the Citadel. He still wore gray, went close-hooded, and carried cat's claw and scalpel at his side, but the dagger and slim curving sword kept in their sheaths. Knowing from of old that a threat is generally more effective than its execution, he limited his activities to the handling of conversations and cash. "I speak for Pulg. Pulg with a G," was his usual opening. Later, if holy men grew recalcitrant or overly keen in their bargaining, and it became necessary to maul saintlets and break up services, he would sign the bullies to take these disciplinary measures while he himself stood idly by, generally in slow, sardonic converse with the attendant girl or girls, and often munching sweetmeats. As the months passed, the Mouser grew fat, and the dancing girls successively more child-slim and submissive-eyed. Fafhrd, on the other hand, broke his longsword across his knee, cutting himself badly in the act, tore from his garments the few remaining ornaments, dull, worthless scraps of base metal and bits of ratty fur, forswore strong drink and all allied pleasures — he had been on small beer and womanless for some time — and became the sole acolyte of one Buadress, the sole priest of Issyk of the Jug. Fafhrd let his beard grow until it was as long as his shoulder-brushing hair, became lean and hollow-cheeked and cavern-eyed, and his voice changed from I just skipped a line. His voice changed from bass to tenor, though not as a result of the distressing mutilation which some whispered he had inflicted upon himself. These last knew he had cut himself, but lied wildly as to where. The gods in Lankhmar, that is, the gods and candidates for divinity who dwell or camp, it may be said, in the imperishable city, not the gods of Lankhmar, a very different and most secret and dire matter. The gods in Lankhmar sometimes seem as if they must be as numberless as the grains of sand in the great eastern desert. The vast majority of them began as men, or more certainly the memories of men who had led ascetic, vision-haunted lives and died painful, messy deaths. One gets the impression that since the beginning of time, an unending horde of their priests and apostles, or even the gods themselves — it makes little difference — have been crippling across that same desert, the sinking land, and the great salt marsh to converge on Lankhmar's low, heavy-arched marsh gate, meanwhile suffering by the way various inevitable tortures, castrations, blindings and stonings, impalements, crucifixions, quarterings, and so forth, at the hands of Eastern brigands and Mingle unbelievers who, one is tempted to think, were created solely for the purpose of seeing to the running of that cruel gauntlet. Among the tormented holy holy throng are a few warlocks and witches seeking infernal immortality for their dark satanic would-be deities, and a very few proto-goddesses, generally maidens reputed to have been enslaved for decades by sadistic magicians and ravaged by whole tribes of Bingals. Lankhmar itself, and especially the earlier mentioned street, serves as the theater, or more precisely the intellectual and artistic testing ground of the proto-gods after their more material but no more cruel sifting at the hands of the brigands and Mingles. A new god, his priests that is, will begin at the marsh gate and more or less slowly work his way up the street of the gods, renting a temple or preempting a few yards of cobbled pavement here and there until he has found his proper level. A very few win their way to the region adjoining the citadel and join the aristocracy of the gods in Lankhmar, transient still, though resident there for centuries and even millennia. The gods of Lankhmar are jealous as their secret. Far more godlets, it can justly be said, play a one-night stand near the marsh gate and then abruptly disappear, perhaps to seek cities where the audiences are less critical. The majority work their way about halfway up the street of the gods and then slowly work their way down again, resisting bitterly every inch and yard until they once more reach the marsh gate and vanish forever from Lankhmar and the memories of men. Now, Isik of the Jug, whom Fafhrd chose to serve, was one of the most lowly and unsuccessful of the godlets, in Lankhmar. He had dwelt there for about 13 years, during which time he had traveled only 2 squares up the street of the gods and was now back again, ready for oblivion. He is not to be confused with Isik the Armless, Isik of the Burnt Legs, Flayed Isik, or any other of the numerous and colorfully mutilated divinities of that name. Indeed, his unpopularity may have been due in part to the fact that the manner of his death, racking, was not deemed particularly spectacular. A few scholars have confused him with Jugged Isik, an entirely different saintlet whose claim to immortality lay in his confinement for 17 years in a not overly roomy earthenware jar. The jug, Isik of the Jug's jug, was supposed to contain waters of peace from the cistern of Silivat, but none apparently thirsted for them. Indeed, had you sought for a good example of a has-been god who had never really been anything, you could hardly have hit on a better choice than Isik of the Jug, while Boisdress was the very type of the failed priest, seer, senile, apologetic, and mumbling. The reason that Fafhrd attached himself to Boisdress rather than to any one of a vast number of livelier holy men with better prospects was that he had once seen Boisdress pat a deaf and dumb child on the head while, so far as Boisdress could have known, no one was looking, and the incident, possibly unique in Lankhmar, had stuck in the mind of the barbarian. But otherwise, Boisdress was a most unexceptional old dodderer. However, after Fafhrd became his acolyte, things somehow began to change. More next time.